Hi, everyone, and welcome today's webinar. My name is Paul Adepoju, and I'm the community manager for the IJNet Global Health Crisis Reporting Forum. And we are really excited to be discussing this very interesting topic that I personally believe many journalists from different parts of the world do struggle with. And when we talk about reporting has always been a capital-intensive project, and it takes a lot for every journalist to be able to do top quality projects because you have to factor in a lot of things like cost of traveling, engaging locals that would make it possible for you to have a better grasp of what you are looking for. But unfortunately, it's not every media organization that is able to provide journalists with the required funding that would enable journalists to be able to execute their desired projects. And this is a vacuum that reporting grants have always been available for journalists to make use of. Unfortunately, journalists are meant to write stories and not write reports or financial reports. So sometimes we always see that, or we often see that the best ideas are not always the ideas that win this grant. And this is something that we would like to see the best that we can do today for us to be able to address this issue and engage and empower journalists with the right skills and information that would go a long way in ensuring that their applications are better polished and better presented. And this is why we are glad to be joined by experts from different organizations that are focused on journalists, and that these organizations too, at one point or another, they are also involved in providing grants. And these experts that we are having today, they've reviewed tons of applications, and they have the right knowledge to be able to say what works and what doesn't work in reporting grants. And so if you are joining us on the Facebook live stream, I encourage you to put your questions that you might have in the comment box below the video that you are watching now. And if you are joining us on the Zoom platform, I encourage you to put your questions in the Q&A. So with that much ado, I would like to introduce our panelists, our experts today. And firstly, from the IJNet, I'd like to introduce Aldana Vales, who is the managing editor. So Aldana, how are you doing today?
Hi, hello. Well, thank you so much for inviting me to be part of this panel. This is such a great topic. I'm Aldana Vales, and I'm IJNet's managing editor. IJNet is a project of ICFJ that publishes tools, trends, and resources for journalists. And one of the key sections that we publish on IJNet is actually opportunities for journalists, like grants or fellowships or that kind of resources. So it is great to be talking about that here. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. And we are also joined today by somebody that I'm actually really excited to be hosting today, which is Lars Boering, who is the new director for the European Journalism Center. How are you doing today? Your mic is off.
Rookie error. Thank you, Paul. Appreciate it a lot to be part of this today. I'm doing well from our office in Maastricht, working hard to improve journalism and the life of journalists. And I'm happy to share some insights today from the work that we do and the experience we have.
So thank you very much. And our first panelist today is from the Pulitzer Center. I'm talking about Steve, who is a senior strategist for collaborative news partnership. Steve, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, Paul. Thank you for the invite. I'm really excited to be here with everyone today to talk about how to get grants. As you said, senior strategist with the Pulitzer Center. That means I'm part of the editorial team, but I also work with our development team to raise funds so that we can support journalists. my own background. The majority of my career I spent doing video news production and also writing just a crazy amount of grant applications to support that work. And now as part of the Pulitzer Center editorial team, I also now am reviewing lots of grant proposals. So excited to be here and look forward to the conversation.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. But before we start asking questions, I would like you, our panelists, to have a better idea of who today's audience is so that we know how we can better guide our assistants and the information we are sharing. So we are going to run a quick number of polls so that you can see who the panelists are and what kind of information can peculiarly be required for people from this area, or this part of the world. So the first thing that we'd like to know is to know which continent our members, participants are from. So let's see how this turns out. We are seeing lots of participants from Africa, Asia, and Europe, North America, South America. I think 67% of our participants are voted. Let's see if we can take this to like 70%. Let's give a few seconds more to have an idea of our audiences. Steve, what do you say to this? Is it a familiar thing when you review grant applications that these parts of the world are more represented among the applicants?
With the Pulitzer Center?
Yes.
Well, you know, we originally started, we were giving grants to US journalists, primarily to travel abroad and report, but that was many, many years ago. And now happy to say that we're providing grants to journalists all over the world and newsrooms. So it'd be hard for me to say that any one region dominates. Still, maybe mostly US journalists and a lot of reporting in the US, but I'd say over half goes to journalists abroad, you know, to do various projects. So we're very happy about that expansion and looking forward to making more connections with journalists around the world.
Okay, the second question I would like our audience to answer is where they are, whether they won a reporting grant or not. So have you won a reporting grant or not? Okay, so nearly 4 out of 10 of our participants have won a reporting grant. And okay, so I think we have an idea. So let me bring Aldana in this. In all of the applications that you've seen, every time, what do you think is the ratio of those that really qualified for any particular application? Do you think a significant number of applicants are qualified for the grants that they applied for?
Well, one of the things that I should add is that before I joined IJNet as managing editor, I was working as a program manager with ICFJ. So I was reviewing applications for programs at ICFJ. And it depends on the program. It depends on what the grant is about. In some cases, you see a lot of great applications, but in many cases, you see applications or proposals that are just not as strong as others, right? In many cases, you see very vague proposals that are not so precise, or they don't really tell you what they want to report on. They mention topics that are very broad. Let's say, for example, I want to report on the impact of COVID-19. Well, right, but that's a very generic topic, right? A great proposal would say, where do you want to see that impact? What kind of impact you are already noticing? And those are the kind of proposals that get the attention of the person who's reading those, and then the person reads more and more and finds out more about what that person wants to report.
Yeah, so I'd like to bring Steve and to really when you heard that this is the topic we were speaking on, what was the number one thing that was on your mind that you think you really need journalists to be aware of this? Is it a mistake that they are repeatedly making, or what do you think is the topmost point that every journalist applying for the grant should also be aware of, taking it from where Aldana stopped?
When it comes to applying for a Pulitzer Center grant, we hope that the applicant will closely kind of review, the rules for the application. Oftentimes, people just don't follow or answer all the questions on the form, and that's really important for us to know as much as we can about who the journalist is who's applying, what they're trying to approach in terms of a topic. For us, the story and the audience are very key. So please, try to do your homework on the story. Try to, have a good basis for what you think that story is about and where it's likely to go with your reporting. And and really then to us, what's key is distribution. Who are the audience? Who will be the audience for this story? What is the reach? It doesn't necessarily have to be a really broad audience. The bigger, we would certainly appreciate widest audience possible, but maybe it's a strategic audience. Maybe you're trying to get that story in front of a particular group. But we just need a good idea of the story, your reporting plan, how you're going to do that reporting specifically, very kind of brief budget outline. Red flags would be kind of running into, proposing a story in a dangerous area without having proposed any safety precautions. For us, that's a big one. We see that a lot. Another one would be, just general unpreparedness about or knowledge about a particular region that they're going to be reporting in. That's another big one for us. And we'd like to see some sort of level of commitment from a publication. That for us is sort of key. It shows us that you as a journalist have done your job to pitch the story to an editor, and that editor is interested in working with you on that story. We don't have any input editorially. We want that to happen between you and the publication. So we do strongly encourage that as well.
Now, there are lots of questions already. I think 40 something. I'm not sure if we can get to all the questions that we have already. But let me just go right in. Aditya is asking, I'm trying to apply for a fellowship and I've not done hardcore investigative journalism. However, I have done opinion and other feature and event reporting on mental health issues. What shall I do to make my application strong? Let me start with Lars on this.
Yeah, I think I could not hear the first part of the question, but I did hear what can I do to make my application strong. I think Steve has already mentioned a couple of them. What I would always suggest is that be prepared to pitch your story, and that means that lots of the basic things in what you need to put into an application can be ready-made, a very strong biography, lots of things that you have done in the past. So as we all like to talk about deadline workers, we have to be careful with that. I think it's important to have lots of things in place that you don't have to think about anymore. Because very often lots of these forms that you apply to are quite standard. What I always suggest is think about the story that you tell yourself. Can you package your story into something that is convincing and shows the board that will review it that you have thought about all these things? If you leave things out, you're probably going to drop out because other people will have done it in a better way. So there's a lot of basic things, and lots of these basic things always are being told in training or seminars, or you can sometimes even find it online. But it prevents you from wasting a lot of time to constantly make it new. That allows you to focus really on the requirements that are there from the organization that is giving away the grant. Read the text very carefully, make sure that you get that in good shape, and getting the basics done is already getting you quite a substantial advantage in applying.
So I remember when I was also starting out as a freelance, one of the major burdens I usually have then was that individuals, journalists with most experience are the ones that often get all of the grants. Even when you think you have this very good idea that is supposed to really get the attention of the grant awarders, those that are giving out the grants, that they seem to gravitate towards the experts. Do you think what are the chances, or what can a freshman journalist do to improve his or her chance of getting an award, even though the notion that professionals are also applying for this still exists? Anybody can jump on that question.
Sure.
Okay.
I think that it depends. Of course, that when you're trying to make your case in terms of why an institution, an organization needs to support your project, your idea, when you are making that case and you say why you are uniquely equipped to do that story, well, of course, people who have experience reporting on a similar topic or doing that kind of work or know the area, know that part of the world, they might be better at making that case. But again, it all comes down to why you are the person that this organization needs to support. Why do we need to support this idea in particular? So if you can argue that, it doesn't really matter how you're going to do that, because if you show that commitment, maybe you're not used to reporting on that topic, for example, but you can show other type of experience, and that is maybe linked to what you want to cover. So in that case, it's how you present that that information, and again, how you make your case for to get that support.
I can see Steve nodding, so that's why I'm bringing in Steve. Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, those are great points, Aldana. And I think, we support journalists at all different levels of their career, and the younger ones, sure, it is, you're just starting out, it is going to be a little tougher. But, generally speaking, we're just looking at what work you've done recently as examples, your references, and we're looking at that proposed project, that reporting plan. How well have you thought that plan through? Does it seem to, look like that will lead to success? And then, does your project and story idea fit with the audience, the intended audience? That's another key part of that. But generally speaking, for us at the Pulitzer Center, we are eager to find and support, early career journalists. We've done that a number of times. We have seen these younger journalists go on and receive other grants and even greater rewards, in journalism. So, it really comes down to just having a good, well thought out and researched proposal.
Lars, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think we have to. I like to always think it a little bit from the other side. What I see now is thinking about inclusivity has grown major in the last years, and it's still not enough. But I think the fact that we are also much aware of it, and that we battle our own biases in this, gives you a great opportunity to actually express that as well. You know, we are more interested than ever in a voice from somebody that is from a place where you tell the story about. And so that's one thing. Use that because I think that is important, and I think it certainly is something that is catching the eye of people giving the grants. Yeah, and the other thing is that if you start with applying for grants, then it's also very useful to see what has been granted in the past, because if you can look at the story that came out of it, then you can see that there must have been a strong pitch behind it. So how is a story that has received a grant is being executed? And that's a learning experience. When you want to be successful, study success and learn from your own failures. And unfortunately, it's always applies the rule that you have to fail many times to get better at it. But I do feel that research on successful ones is important, but also to constantly look out for knowledge that can improve how you write your pitch. And if possible, see if you can get some help with that, because there's great people around that can support you in giving you the knowledge about how to pitch properly.
Okay, so a question I would like to take now is from Bumi Adiloju. The question is this: I would like to ask about the major components of a winning grant. Aldana, what do you think are the major components of a winning grant? So let's be talking points. We're going from one speaker to another.
Sure. I think that a story. I'm a journalist too, and we are storytellers, and I think there needs to be that component in a story, in an application too, and the story about yourself, about what you want to cover, right? And how you're going to do that, and what impact maybe you will have with that story. And it has to be very precise. It doesn't have to be a generic way to present that. It has to be very precise because it is your own story. Yeah.
Steve?
Yeah, I'd say, you know, again, not to repeat myself, we're looking for a really good story and you know, a strong audience. The winning, you know, when we award these grants, usually some similarities would be, you know, a very succinct, good 250-word proposal and a good kind of easy to understand and believe reporting plan, executable reporting plan. Will this journalist or group of journalists be able to carry that out? And then, you know, good distribution to strategic audiences. And I think, you know, one thing that we really like to see is collaboration among journalists. So oftentimes, you know, you might be a young journalist just starting out, but maybe you partner with a very experienced, for example, photographer, and you bring, or a videographer, and you bring other elements into your proposal that make that story or that project much more kind of robust. And by virtue of bringing in maybe a veteran, a reporter to work with you, to collaborate, you might even be able to reach new audiences or new publishers where you did not previously have connections as a young journalist. That could help kind of build your network too. So we like to see the projects that involve collaborations, whether that be within a country or even across borders. We really appreciate that level of work that's being done by reporters working together. And yeah, I'll just stop there.
Yeah, so I would have loved to bring Lars here, but we have lots of questions. So another question I would like to ask is this. Lillian is asking, do you expect the journalistic project to be started with own resources or to deliver a percentage of the grant to start the investigation? That's starting the reporting project that a journalist is asking for grant for. Does a project that a journalist has already done some research with his or her own personal funds have a better chance of being approved than one that nothing has been done? So I think I'll bring Lars insight in on this.
Yeah, certainly. I think you have to do the work before. So the research that you do is seen. You should see that also as an investment. It's not something that you will get directly money for, but you have to do your research because you ask for a certain amount to be given to you because of your story and the importance that you do. By doing some research and also specifically state that you already have looked into it. Why are you doing this? Why it doesn't matter to us? Why does it matter to the audience? It is a sign of taking the grant very seriously. And I think that really helps when the assessment is made, whether this is something to support, to say yes to it, or to, let's say, put it at least at the next level of something to look at. Yeah. So investment should not always seen in investing money. And I think in many ways you also have to be careful because some grants don't support something that is already ongoing or is already being supported elsewhere. So that's reading into the text of the grant. But yeah, let's be fair, do research as an investment for sure.
Yes, and this is similar to what Deepa is also asking about how much of pre-reporting is expected or will help the application case to be more compelling. I think I would like to give that to Aldana. Do you want to also add anything to this discussion?
Sure, I think it is connected to what Lars was saying. If you do some research, you need to do some previous research to show that you are the ideal person to report on something, that you are the ideal person to receive that grant for that topic or for that idea that you have. If you don't do that, previous research, if you don't do that at least previous reporting, I don't think there's a way for you to show that you can handle the topic, that you're the expert, or that you are the person to report on that. So it is key to do some kind of previous research to know what you want to cover. Yeah.
Can I add something to that?
Of course.
Could I add something to that? Yeah, I've heard some editors at different publications say that, doing some kind of like roughly, 40% of research. I don't know how you quantify that, but I think one way to look at it is whether, I've worked as a freelancer, but also within organizations producing news, and you always have to do a certain amount of pre-reporting, whether you're going to pitch that story to your producer or editor inside an organization or out. So that's, we like to see that you as a journalist are putting in that little bit of effort, the same that you would to pitch it to a publication. And then we're gonna, if it's a good one, we'll bring in support. And we like to also see then the third leg is support coming from that publication. That it's sort of everyone has to have some skin in the game to make these projects work.
Yeah, thank you. And so I'll go to a question that I think is very relevant, which is the peculiar case of freelance journalists. And so Farah from Iraq is asking, please, if the freelance journalist did not specify in the proposal a specific journalistic medium for publication, what would you advise them to do? I understand where this is coming from. Sometimes you are passionate about the story. This is a story that is worth reporting, and you are a freelancer, but you are not yet sure about which outlet you are going to give that idea from. So how do you think freelancers should handle their case when applying for grants? Yeah, Steve, you're on my screen, so yeah.
Okay. Well, we typically would like to see that when there's a proposal that it's a little more evolved in the sense that you've done enough of the research that how best you want to tell this story to a particular audience. And that's the key with having the publications or broadcasters involved, is how do you want to best tell this story to which audiences? We don't really give kind of the kind of seed money grant for you to kind of take that time to sort of figure out where you want it to go. We want to have that reporting plan, and where you want the story to be broadcast or published a lot more kind of fleshed out. So if we got a proposal like that and we like the topic, we would probably go back to the journalists and say, please tell us, like, what, how are you going to distribute this thing?
Yeah, Lars, I want to bring you in, and I think there is also a similar comment from another participant, CJ Louis. CJ Louis is asking, other than a commitment from editors, there are some grant applications that will say that at least let the editor confirm that they will publish the story. Which editors are always reluctant to give freelance journalists? So the question is, are there other things freelancers can do to convince you they are capable of getting the story done and getting it published? So let Lars come in at this point.
Oh yeah, that's a big question. Well, I assume that if you apply for a grant, that you are already, very often you have done reporting and you have built relationships with publications. If you haven't done that, then this is something that you either do simultaneously, or you have to work on that. I think very often publications are very interested in stories from freelancers that say, look, I'm going to pitch this. Are you interested in this? And will you be helping me with a support letter? Of course, then the pitching also applies to the publication. Why this publication? Why now? Why with them? And how does this match up with the request that is sort of sent out with the grant? Yeah, it is true that as a freelancer, you're at a double disadvantage, because you have to pitch two sides. But I do feel that very often you can team up and get an editor to be interested in it as well and help you to support it, because very often a publication also benefits in a big way from a great important story to be told. Yeah.
Aldana, I think a number of IJNet grants have gone to freelancers. So what do you think? What is the experience you've had with freelancers giving them grants? And what do you think other freelancers need to know when applying for grants?
Sure. If you are freelancers make a big portion of IJNet's audience, so I'm sure they must have found opportunities in our website, in particular about ICFJ's grants that have gone to freelancers. In my experience, first, they did have some kind of support from publications, from other organizations. And in those cases, there was a letter, for example, from an editor supporting freelancers. That's in the case where the grant was for everyone, for every journalist, right? There are some cases where the grant has a mentorship component, where they can actually use that mentorship to look for, to learn how to pitch that story to a publication. So that's a different type. And that's really useful for freelancers, because they can use that instance to find a way to distribute that story and to publish that story. But it's not really common. The most common is to find support in some kind of publication, support from an editor, to show that they are able to publish that story. another way that I can think of is maybe you don't have a particular plan for the specific story that you're pitching, but you can show that you have experience as a freelancer and that you are really publishing stories in several publications. So in that sense, if I'm reading an application, I get the feeling that it will be easy for you to place this story in the magazine, in the newspaper, whatever. But I need to be able to see that. If there is no way to see that, that's very, very hard. Yeah.
Thank you very much. So there is a direct question. I think this is meant for Lars. That EJC used to have the Global Health Reporting Grants for Africa. Are they coming up ever again?
Yeah, there's a question being asked, and a new director. I have just started here, but I know about this. Sometimes we have grants that come up because we work with an organization to help them to announce it and to distribute. This was one of them. So as much as you want to have continuity and to being able to support journalists with grant, this one was had an end date to it. Of course, we are always looking out for new ways to get that going, but it's difficult to make promises on that level. There's a lot of grants out there for lots of people. It's seen as a competitive field. But I think that for us now, we don't have any direct plans for it, but we are happy to point out other options that are available there, and it's certainly something that is needed. So I'll promise to look out for it, but I don't have them right now, unfortunately.
Okay, let's take a question from our Facebook community. Winston would like to ask Winston said, I would like to pitch a proposal story that tackles water challenges in Malawi by working with several other journalists that I work with to give a picture of magnitude of the problem and what is being done to solve the problem. Now, the question is, what's the best way to pitch this story? I think I'll start with Steve. This is a case study of a collaborative project. How do you think the best approach would be to pitch this story?
Well, you know, there are a lot of water challenge, water sanitation stories coming out around the world all the time. You know, for us, we would want to see, it's obviously, you know, water and sanitation issues are a systemic, you know, crises. It's a problem we care about at the Pulitzer Center. You know, we would want to see what is it about this reporting project that's going to be kind of new? What is it going to bring new to our understanding of the issue, the challenges? Is there a reason or a need for these different journalists in different countries to be collaborating together? How is that going to add value to a project such as this? And then probably lastly, I think I noticed that the question mentioned something about running a newsletter. We like to see a good distribution plan that involves local and regional news outlets. So we want that wide distribution. We also like stories to, if it's possible, to be published in different languages, maybe reach even communities, subgroup communities within countries that may need or benefit from hearing about this reporting that perhaps being done on their own community. So we like those kind of innovative approaches to getting stories the widest distribution to you know, very strategic audiences.
Yeah, Aldana, do you have anything to add? Pitching collaborative stories.
Yes, about that, that's actually a great way to show some kind of proof or to address this issue that Steve was mentioning in terms of what's the audience and what's the reach that this story will have a collaborative story, will benefit from the audiences from the different parts of that collaboration, right? So that's a great way to address that. And even if you can partner with an organization that already has experience in getting grants, for example, or that they have a specific knowledge that they can also give to this proposal, that's actually even better. Yeah.
Okay, because of time, I would like to move to another question. This question, I'll combine two questions from Rose and Sonia. Rose said, I think this is indirectly going to Steve, that since 2013, I've written about 9 proposals to Pulitzer grants, and I've never been successful. What could be the problem? I wish you could give feedback. Can you quickly give a response to Steve, to Rose? Steve.
Yes. Hi, Rose. Thank you for that question. You know, it's difficult to say, you know, exactly, you know, here, you know, why we may have turned down the many proposals that you put in, but generally speaking, you know, it's got to do with that right combination of finding the right story and a commitment from a you know, a regional or a local publication. But you know, that said, you do have to understand that I think all of us face this. We get a lot of proposals from a lot of journalists every week, and for us, you know, it's a difficult decision to make. You know, the competition is really strong when comparing different proposals. So it may not be so much that yours, you know, it was not selected, but it had to do with you know, picking one that was perhaps a little stronger proposal. Sorry, I can't be more specific about.
Yeah, I think you've tried. So I think I'll be taking a panelist for one question now so that we can really move fast. We have some questions on reference letters. So I'll combine 2 questions, and anybody that really wants to answer this question should jump on it. Darani is asking, how important are reference letters to winning a reporting grant? Like getting a publication or editor support, it is often a challenge for freelance journalists. Then Anima Sur is asking a somewhat similar question. It is often hard for freelancers to get so many references. Referencers often do not want to keep doing it for freelancers, especially for multiple applications. Last time my reference delayed my reference letter, so he could refer one of his employees. Other freelancers too have experienced hostile referrals. So who wants to address the issue of the importance of reference letters and advice for freelancers?
Yeah, I can again give that a try. I mean, yes, I recognize all these questions, and freelance is a tricky position to be in because besides that you want to pitch, you also have to be constantly building relationships with people that are able to work with you to get things published. I think there's lots of editors that are very willing to help out, but of course there's also a thing of how many letters can you write while you also have to do your work. And the other side is they have to be very convinced that the letter that they want to give out is going to a project that really makes an impact. Because if the grant will come through, it's very likely that it will come back to them and that they feel that they have to work with that. And if in the grant application this letter is part of it, it's also expected to be out there. There's nothing worse than having a grant being given out. A story will be made and no publication is attached to it. So it's a little bit of a circle. But you have to make sure that you build relationship with editors and have a good track record with them. And then I know that lots of them are very willing to help you out. But one thing I would suggest is make it easy for the editor to write this letter, give them all the information that needs to be in there. I have many times written letters to support people, but basically the one that is asking for it is writing the whole letter. And that for me, then it's easy to just adjust it a little bit instead of writing a full letter that is going to be put in. It's all these little tips and tricks that you have to get used to and use to your advantage.
I would have loved to, okay. Of course, you can, Lars. Go ahead.
I just wanted to add that, you know, we required a very short description, 250 words. So we purposefully try to keep it very short. But when you're pitching editors, I've heard editors say that, you know, people, freelance journalists often send them way too much information. They have literally 60 seconds to a minute to read the top line of your pitch. So when you're pitching the news outlets, definitely take the time that the editor has to review it in mind. Keep it very, very brief.
I don't want to keep Aldana out of it. Do you want to be part of this?
No, I think that what Steve and Lars have been saying is exactly that. One thing that I understand that it is an extra burden, right, on the freelancer who wants to apply, and that has to be there has to be some kind of planning. So a recommendation letter is not the one thing holding your application. But yes, I understand that this is like an extra step, right? What Lars was saying about submitting everything that the editor or the person making the recommendation needs to know to write that letter and making that step easier. I think that's a great tip. That yes, that's something that freelancers need to keep in mind. Yeah.
Now, Lars, what do you think about pitching a story without reference names? Is it an automatic rejection, or you still consider that kind of application?
No, I don't think so. It really depends on how good you pitch the story yourself. I mean, if you listen to Steve, 250 words, that's not a lot. But it's, I mean, this is basically what you call the elevator pitch. So you have to be so sure and confident about what you are doing. I mean, it just needs just very simple things. I mean, I have it here in front of me. Who are you? What do you do? Why is it unique? And what are you looking for? And what are you actually asking for? These are sort of basic elements that you can write very easily and prepare it and then put it in. But 250 words, yeah, if you can't do the elevator pitch, then it's not easy to get people interested in looking at the two-pager. And that is something where you have to train yourself to be very concise. And I think a proposal for a story should never be much more than 2 pages. If it's more than that, then it takes too long, and it's you don't have the time to go through it. It needs to be spot on. And so I would say, without a reference letter, I think there's probably numerous examples of people that have been able to do that. It always helps, but it's not a necessity.
Steve, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree with everything that Lars said. Yeah, I think you know, it's got to be succinct, to the point, and for us, the outlet is key, and also a budget that matches the reality of what you're trying to do. That sometimes we see a reporter who's relatively inexperienced proposes a huge budget for a project that has actually kind of you know, maybe a smaller regional news outlet, and so there's the scale is just off. That's a kind of a one consideration that applicants need to think about is just, does the budget fit the reporting plan and kind of the potential for the reach of that potential?
Yeah, I'm really glad that you mentioned budget, because it's also the next question that we have on budgeting formats. So what really works for you? What are you willing to see in how a journalist presents what she or they want to spend the money on? So a budgeting format, what works? Let me go to Aldana.
Sure. As Steve was saying, a budget that matches what you are proposing is key. One of the keys to draft a budget, or the first thing that I want to say actually is when there's a call for a proposal for applications and it asks for a budget, submit the budget. One of the many common mistakes that I've seen is that people don't submit, don't attach the budget, and if the program requires a budget, you need to submit that. Sometimes people don't know how to create one, but the basics is list the activities that you want to do, and that's why it's so important that you have this reporting plan. List the activities and what are the costs associated with those activities. That's the basics. And then it has to be realistic. In terms of if I see if you need some kind of equipment, for example, and I see that you actually have some quotes on that equipment that you want to buy and you attach that, then that's a great way to show me that you've done your research and you actually know what those activities are going to cost. That's what I have to add about that.
Budgeting is a serious issue that I think I would still want one more question on. The three of you at some point or another mentioned realistic budgets, but we have what is the definition of a realistic budget? And sometimes as a journalist, your focus is the story, and you know whatever you are able to get from this grant, you will find a way to make it work. So you still keep a flexible budget. I don't think that is a wrong thing. Or Lars, do you think that is wrong? And what do you describe as a realistic budget?
Yeah, I think it's a misconception that you want to keep it flexible. The reason is that grants get huge amounts of applications in, and the things that have been granted in the past is very often being checked. So if you talk about a realistic budget, then people that assess the application have seen so many things before. And if it is different than the things they have seen before, then they can easily say, well, this is not realistic. That flight ticket is too expensive, or I mean, we're not going to go into detail and look up how much a ticket really is, but the basic number that you put in for travel costs or food and beverages, what you need, that's quite a rule of thumb. So if we talk about realistic, then these things matter very much. That it doesn't catch your eye to say, hey, this is strange. But I find it part of your pitch is really, can you realistically execute this story as you have it in mind? And if you budget it too low, which is also sometimes a mistake people make, if the grant is talking about $10,000 or euros or whatever it is, make sure that you get the budget to maximize that, because that is actually what they want to give you. And money is not the only reason to execute it well, but if it's there, then you have to realistically put it to use. It's a tool. So yeah, don't think that it's possible to just throw in a ballpark figure and say, I'll send you the receipts later and I'll figure it out. Everything that helps to convince the person that is making the decision, everything that helps to make the positive decision is going to be in this proposal. So be precise and concise with money.
I have just one more thing to add on that. We also like to know if you've raised or intend to raise any more funds that might support the project that or reporting project that you're planning to do. That's helpful also for us in considering whether we give a grant.
Okay, and before I ask the next question, I really want to still have a better understanding of how our members, our participants, how their personal struggles. So want to do a word cloud, and so the question is the URL you go to is www. You can see this screen on the menti.com, and you use the code 5020 so that you input 1 or 2 words what you consider to be the major challenges in putting report grant applications together. So just go to a URL, this URL, use that code and answer the question. And while you do that, I would like to take one more question, and which is from an anonymous attendee. And the question is, if a newsroom a journalist works for does not support the kind of stories that a journalist is interested in applying reporting grants for, what is the advice? So that is a question. The journalist is interested in applying for a particular report grant, and but the journalist media house is not supporting that kind of stories. So what do you think the journalist should do? Who wants to take that? Okay, Steve, go ahead.
Well, I'm trying to put myself in your shoes. I would maybe talk to my report to or manager and sell this as a professional development opportunity, something that maybe could be done as like almost like a sabbatical that could be done on the side. Maybe that would be one way to approach it. I'd like to hear if others have ideas.
Lars, do you want to come in?
Yeah, I'm not sure if I have an answer to it. I mean, there are multiple ways of finding places to publish. Yeah, all these things are these thresholds for you to get where you want. And you are dependent sometimes on somebody that will support you or back you up. And even if it's a convincing proposal, then it might be still very hard to get there. Yeah, I think that would be very specific. But I also would say there's very often a list of stories that you want to tell, and it's impossible to get all of them out. So make sure you don't put everything on one story that you want to get across, but make sure that you have 3, 4, or 5 proposals that you could work on, and maybe something else will be able to be materializing.
Okay, there's a good question from Hasmin, which is if the project is acceptable and but the project provided by the journalist is not appropriate, do you reject the project right away, or can acceptable budget be discussed? Aldana.
Yeah, I think that it depends. Again, I think it depends on the program. Some kind of programs help you shape that budget and will tell you, well, this is not really what the budget should look like, and they are going to help you create a more realistic budget. But in other types of programs, it is part of your application materials. And if that's not convincing, there's going to be another application that is convincing. And think that you are competing against that. So yes, I think it depends on the program, but in many cases, that's also part of all the materials that you need to send in order to make your case. So it needs to fit what you're proposing.
Who wants to add anything?
No.
Oh, okay, then I think that's spot on. So I don't know whether you are following what participants are putting up. The key to understanding this word cloud is the biggest item is the one that is most popular. that most participants struggle with, which is budget, editor letters, and again, budgeting, followed by scope, and which also brings to mind the internal struggles. Don't you think sitting on the other side of the table, being the ones making the decision, doesn't provide the better understanding of who an individual journalist is? Let me give you an instance. If you're a writer, your goal is to do a story, but you have to struggle with ensuring you are calculating these, and without these, your documents will not be fully accepted. And this is a really, really major way, that a major problem that even our participants, as you can see, in this real life, real-time poll are struggling with. Which brings us to one of the questions I always have, which is, what is your opinion on the use of templates gotten sourced from online? Do you accept all templates that grant applicants are getting online? When you see them, are you happy to see them, or that is an automatic turn off for you? I'll start with Lars.
Well, if it's a very generic template, then it's very likely that you will see it. What I like is that some journalists I know, also photojournalists or documentary storytellers, they have made their own template, which makes it very easy for them to apply to all the grants that are out there, and it really raises your success chances on success. And I think then at one point you would probably also recognize this person always to send it in. And a template doesn't necessarily have to be bad. I would say that it would be really good to have your own template, which is ready to go, which you adjust to the grant and the specifics of the grants. But then for 80%, you already have your work done. And many times I see that people start working on a grant and start from scratch and go for it, and then you end up running into a deadline. So use these templates to learn and to create your own, and make sure that it's always updated, and then adjust the 20 or the 25% that you read in the small letters of a grant recommendation or anything that needs to be in there. Yeah.
Who else wants to add anything? Do you want to come in, Steve?
I just appreciated Lars's very efficient recommendation there. We allow people to attach a larger proposal, just as he mentioned, with maybe a photographer or a filmmaker, or just a very much more expansive readout of the project. But it's really important. I'm looking at that word cloud and kind of the challenges, and thinking about kind of, can I just have a template and kind of shoot it out to different places? I think one of the biggest challenges that many grant applicants have is really making sure that they're attuned to the organization or the newsroom that they are pitching to. You might be wondering, why is my pitch failing with this particular newsroom? Well, maybe it's just not a good fit for that particular publication, or maybe the way you pitched it wasn't a good fit, or you pitched the wrong part of that particular news organization for that story. Same goes for budgets. We talked about this before, the kind of mismatching the budget with the project. It's paying attention to those types of details when you're making the approaches. Have I done enough kind of background research into the organization or the publication that I fully understand what they are looking for in my pitch or my proposal?
What can I still go for? We still have a question on, okay, yes or no, should a freelance journalist add salary to the budget? Steve, yes or no?
It's complicated. It's complicated. We typically do not provide stipends. We most of our grants are for the hard costs of reporting, and we hope that the pitch and the connection with the publication will provide some payment for the journalists. But it's possible, if there's a letter explaining why stipend is necessary, we'll consider it.
Aldana.
Like Steve was saying, it depends. It is very complicated. It depends on the program accepting stipends or not. But again, if you make your case and you say why you need to get that, you might be able to. Yeah. And sorry, I need to leave. Thank you so much for inviting me to participate here in this panel. And I love what everyone has been saying. Thank you.
So thanks, Aldana, for joining us, which leaves me with Steve and Lars. So Lars, what do you think? How do you think, David is asking, how should I respond when my proposal is rejected?
Very often you don't have a chance to go back or to change it. If there is a possibility to get feedback, I would always ask for it. But I think if lots of applications has been sent, it's always difficult to get that, because that is too much work, unfortunately. Yeah. That is difficult, because direct feedback will help you to improve. And yeah, I think it's more wise at that moment to find some help with somebody else that has been successful, or somebody that I mean, for me personally, I think it's always a very good thing, and this is why I also again talk about make sure you have everything ready way before the deadline, because it's always good to show it to somebody else and say, look, this is what I wrote. If you read this, do you understand actually what I'm trying to do here? Is this convincing? So it maybe getting feedback before is much more important than afterwards, because before you can add it to it, and afterwards you very often don't get it.
Yeah. So one more question. Another question is from Wambi Michael. Michael would like to ask is that regarding mentors, that many grants do come with mentors. So one of the problems that I have encountered is that some of the mentors attached to the grant want to entirely influence the final copy, which brings a conflict. So Steve, what do you think a journalist can do to reduce friction with mentors?
I don't have any direct experience with that at the Pulitzer Center. At the Pulitzer Center, we do have mentorships for our student reporting fellows. So these are these are university students who are first time often reporting out a project. So we'll attach them to an experienced journalist to help them with the tough questions as they work through their project. I find it really surprising that a mentor would be so heavy-handed to want to influence kind of the editorial kind of, copy everything. I'd find another mentor.
Okay, and we have another question, and some grants specify that they won't fund projects that are already being funded. But I'm a freelancer and I have a contract with a publication for the story. How do I get around this? Maybe the contract fee won't pay all of the project costs. Last, do you want to take that?
Go ahead.
Okay,
go
Steve.
ahead.
Steve,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Sorry.
Go ahead,
Steve.
Steve. Okay, I'll go. Well, I think then if you explain, yeah, that's a difficult one. If they allow you to get a grant for a part of a story, then you should just be very clear about it. I'm writing this bigger story. This is a sub part of the story, which is very important, and this is what I would like the grant to be for. I've already published about this, but the story is much bigger than that. If the grant allows you to do that, then I would certainly go for it. And I think it very often plays into success, because if they have seen that it's already been published, or they see that a sub part of the story has already been supported, that also builds confidence in, hey, this should be in good shape. this should help them forward. So that gets you closer to a yes.
Okay, and so this there's another question. As a young journalist, I have zero idea about how to approach international organizations with regards to a story. Could one of the panelists please inform about a channel of communication that someone who does not have a built network in the community can use? I think you should also add another question that I read about a journalist that has been on hiatus for a long period of time and wants to now resume by applying for a reporting grant. What are the chances and how can such a person improve the chance? So 2 questions. A novice, a starting journalist that wants to apply, reach out to international organizations for funding, and a journalist that has been on a long hiatus, taking a break from journalism. So what is the advice? Steve?
Well, I think maybe in both cases, you're going to need some help. You're going to need to find somebody, maybe not a mentor, but someone who can help you identify the correct person within certain organizations or the correct opportunities for grants within a certain organization. So you can make that approach, and hopefully, then you will do the work to figure out exactly how best to make that pitch, and keeping in mind everything we talked about making it succinct and making the story unique and having a good reporting plan. But I think in the cases you're describing, you might need a little help. I did bring up an example earlier, which I really truly believe in, and that's partnering with a more experienced journalist. And maybe that person isn't from the same discipline as a writer, or maybe you're a writer and you partner with an experienced photographer, but that other person who you bring into the project might be able to be that introduction to a publication that you're wanting to work with.
Okay, Lars, do you have any suggestions?
No, yeah, it's difficult. Very often these specific questions are very hard to answer. It is a super competitive landscape, and once you leave, other people will definitely walk into that space. I feel that if you are very convinced about getting back, and you are very committed about finding a place for your story to be told, you're just in the same bracket as everybody, and you have the same chances. I would say, and possibly because you have some experience from the past, you actually have an advantage to that. So all I would say is make sure you feel confident and trust in your own self, knowing what you want, and just show that to the world. Confidence gets you a long way.
Okay, we've really run, we've gone beyond the deadline. So I will just ask one last question, and let me start with what do you think journalists, we are going back to the way we started, because I know some people joined us quite late when you were giving your overview of what a standard pitch is and issues that they need to avoid in their pitch. So what do you think, what advice do you think cuts across all spaces of journalism, irrespective of the genre and specialty that a journalist is? So I'll start with you, Lars. What do you think should be the key focus for journalists when putting together a grant application?
Yeah, I said it before. I have this small list of things that I would always suggest people that it can be, think about the elevator pitch, which is super short, can be verbal, but it can also be written. And it's really at the minimum describes who you are, what you do, what makes you and what you do is unique. And what are you looking for and what are you actually asking for? But most of all, you have to be very concise and very short. Make sure that people that get it in front of you are interested by your very concise story. So put in all these little elements and make sure that it is a conversation starter. It should not be a monologue. If it's a conversation starter that people make them think about it or get interested, then if once you see people start thinking about it, it's a conversation starter and not a monologue.
And I would, I would, those are all perfectly great points. We would like to have in all our applications. And I think, just again, being attuned to the budget, making sure that's not a big mismatch from, the proposed reporting plan. We always take a close look at that. And as we've discussed earlier, distribution, the audience, who will be the audience for this, how far it's likely reach, why are you going to be publishing in specific news outlets, how many of them? And lastly, and very important, especially if you're reporting on, risky areas or topics, is a good safety plan. And certainly during the pandemic, good COVID safety plan for you and subjects while reporting is crucial. We do look at that, and especially when it comes to indigenous communities and people who are vulnerable more vulnerable, I should say, potentially to the pandemic.
Yeah, we've seen if you're looking at the chat area, there are lots of requests for samples of pitches. So I don't know if any of you have access to that to share, that we can put it out there. And so you also mentioned something regarding the pandemic. In the light of the pandemic, do you think the pandemic has had a positive or negative impact on grants availability to journalists? What do you think, Steve?
Well, it's been interesting, to say the least, to see how the pandemic has impacted journalism. I do think that a number of good, well-meaning foundations have gone to pretty good lengths, I think, to help provide funding for all different levels of reporting during the pandemic. So that's been I think a pretty good positive outcome. I think another one that's been really interesting to look at is, I can speak for the Pulitzer Center, is that we'd already been working with and supporting a number of journalists around the world, but certainly the pandemic, we looked to find more ways to support journalists from other countries getting these stories out about the pandemic. And not only that, but trying to encourage them to reach audiences outside of their region, and actually trying to link them to new editors outside of the region to help get those stories, those important stories from other countries, into other media markets.
Lars?
Yeah, what I see is that lots of funds have really stepped up in a major way, and lots of new money has also flooded in. Unfortunately, when now the pandemic gets more under control, you see a lot of it disappearing. Hopefully some of them will stay. So I think that is a good thing. I see a positive thing in lots of publications are now more open and willing to publish stories that have been granted. I think the Guardian newspaper really has a special department for this, and is very open about this, and it's okay to also show that you are funded. The difficulty here is that lots of publications and lots of journalism is in trouble. Newspapers disappear, and so the amount of places that you can publish is diminishing, and there's only a reasonable amount of stories that can be published. So it's a little bit strange. Less traditional outlets, very often more money available, but that also needs you to think about different kinds of publication platforms to get your story out there. It doesn't always have to be a traditional title. It can also be something new and something exciting.
And as we close, do you have any link where journalists can have access to information on reporting, grants, from your organization, or do you have any central database that you think journalists can always frequently check for latest updates on reporting grants? Steve, let's start with Steve.
Well, yeah, I think I just go to pulitzercenter.org and grants, look up our grants and fellowships pages, and you'll see there's a variety of opportunities there. These are open to journalists all over the world. Send us your best pitches for underreported stories on crises from around the world. And yeah, we'll look forward to reviewing them. We're by and large, I think almost all of our grants, except for maybe the fellowships, are a rolling application. So there's no deadline. So yeah, look forward to reading.
Lars?
Yeah, I was quickly multitasking, Googling while I was listening. Steve and I have both put some tips and tricks into the question part so you can follow some of these links there. Yeah, and I think if you Google journalism grants, you will find sometimes an overview. These things change, of course. Some of them come and go. But I think if you do some research, you will find undoubtedly a lot of locations where you can find them and apply for them as well.
Yeah, thank you very much. There is this very good comment that I would like to read out that shows that highlights one of the reasons why we are doing this at the ICFJ. Is from Megan Parker, who from the commentary is, at the Society of Environmental Journalists, we've seen our grantees struggle to complete projects during the pandemic, mainly due to travel restrictions, but also due to making it harder to pitch editors focused on COVID. One thing we did was to de-emphasize travel as a component of our grant making and focus more on stipend piece. And do you agree with this approach? And do you think going forward from the pandemic, this is going to be a strategy that grant awarding organizations would also be deploying? I think that is for Lars.
Yeah, I was reading along while you were asking this question. I honestly do not know. I do see that travel becomes less dominant. I like the fact that somehow journalists have been forced to look for stories close by in their own place where they live, which is not a bad thing. Why do we always have to go at great lengths and sit in an airplane to get to places to talk about it? Let's have people who live there or on the ground tell us these stories. But I'm not so sure if, yeah, stipends, it's a beautiful thing, but in very often stipends are not focused on getting a story. Very often stipends are more in developing your own career at a larger scale. Hopefully that takes place. I would really support it. But for me, grants are very often more focused on storytelling and getting that across. And so I would like to see them live next to each other instead of replacing each other.
Okay, Steve, what is your final words for our participants?
Yeah, final words is I think when you think about what Lars just said there and what we've discussed, you know, and what we've seen throughout this pandemic, that there is a lot of opportunity out there for applying for these reporting grants. There are many different types, and I do think both editors and you know, those of us who work within these grant giving organizations, we are looking to support journalists in different regions around the world, different localities, and help lift up the best underreported stories from these areas, and the journalists help improve their careers as well. So yeah, would look forward to seeing your applications in the near future.
Lars, what are your final words?
Yeah, I keep looking at things like this. I really am happy to be part of this because I can see in the responses how much this matters to people. Lots of information is out there. Lots of websites that give out grants also show you how to apply to it. Think about the fact that this is also a time where more money seems to be available for this than ever before. So make sure you get there and apply for it, and believe in yourself, because that is something that is the basic of what you do. Believe in yourself and make sure you get your story across. And there's lots of people out there to help you out.
Yeah, so thank you very much to our resource persons today. And quick information, and next week we'll be looking at still on the same issue from the other perspective. Our panelists next week will be journalists that have won reporting grants. We'll also be hearing their own stories, how they put these grants together, and so that we can, at the end of next week's session, you are going to have a balanced understanding of how reporting grants, what experts like Steve and Lars are looking for in reporting grants, and how successful applications were put together. And we believe that by the end of these special webinars, you would have a better chance at ensuring that your grant applications are successful, and you are not missing out because you did not know one thing or the other. So it's been an amazing time today with you. The questions keep rolling in, and we will always endeavor to take as many as we can. I want to encourage you that if you are still looking for more information regarding journalism, any aspects of journalism, and your practice as a journalist, please visit IJNet platform on www.ijnet.org. And if you would like to know more about these ICFJ Global Health Crisis Reporting Forum, check out www.icfj.org. And you can also join our very active Facebook community. What you just need to do is to go to Facebook and search for ICFJ Global Health Crisis Reporting Forum. And we are going to be here today again next week. And I really want to appreciate Steve and Lars for waiting the extra minutes that this conversation took. And I say, have a lovely day. Bye, everyone.